One of the most fascinating talking points from the All Blacks Rugby's greatest rivalry tour victory over the Bulls was not simply the final score, but a controversial moment involving Codie Taylor that exposed an interesting gap between what the rugby lawbook allows and what many supporters believe should happen in the spirit of the game. The incident came in the 29th minute at Loftus Versfeld, after Bulls tight head prop Francois Klopper was shown a yellow card by referee Nika Amashukeli, leaving the home side with only 14 players on the field. From the resulting penalty, All Blacks captain Codie Taylor made an intelligent tactical decision to choose a scrum rather than immediately kick for territory or points, forcing the Bulls to make an adjustment to their forward pack. The All Blacks then demonstrated their dominance at the set piece, winning another penalty and creating an opportunity to put further pressure on a weakened Bulls defense. But instead of choosing another scrum, Taylor decided to tap and go, and that was when the controversial moment unfolded. The All Blacks hooker placed the ball on the ground and appeared to dummy the tap, creating the impression among the Bulls defenders that the penalty had already been taken. Juann Else, JF van Heerden, and other Bulls defenders reacted immediately, shooting forward before beginning to retreat when they realized that the ball had not actually been tapped. In that tiny moment of uncertainty, Taylor quickly tapped the ball for real and exploded towards the try line. The Bulls defense was suddenly caught in an awkward position, and despite JF van Heerden's efforts to stop him, Taylor used his strength and momentum to force his way over the line for the All Blacks. The reaction from the Bulls players was immediate because they believed Taylor had deliberately misled them into thinking the penalty had already been taken. They appealed to Nika Amashukeli, but the Georgian referee was completely confident in his decision, telling the Bulls that Taylor was allowed to do exactly what he had done. And when the lawbook is examined closely, Amashukeli was absolutely correct. There is no specific World Rugby law that prohibits a player from dummying a quick tap in this situation. That is the crucial point in this entire debate. The action may have looked unusual, clever, cheeky, or even unfair to some viewers, but rugby's laws do not automatically make something illegal simply because it deceives the opposition. In fact, deception is a major part of rugby. Players use dummy passes, dummy runners, changes of direction, and deceptive movements constantly to create space and manipulate defenders. The law only places specific restrictions on deception in certain situations. One example is at the back of a ruck, where Law 15.16g prevents players from taking actions designed to make opponents believe that the ruck has ended when it has not. That specific protection does not apply to the quick tap situation used by Taylor. Therefore, from a strict technical perspective, the All Blacks captain had done nothing illegal. Amashukeli was right to award the try, and overturning it simply because the move surprised the Bulls would have been difficult to justify under the existing laws. But this is where the debate becomes much more interesting, because rugby is not played entirely through a lawbook. It is also governed by the concept of sportsmanship and the spirit of the game. World Rugby Law 9.27 states that a player must not do anything that goes against the spirit of good sportsmanship, with the sanction being a penalty. The question, therefore, is not whether Taylor's action was technically legal, because it clearly was, but whether a referee should have considered the broader spirit of the game when deciding how to manage the situation. Some supporters will argue that this would be dangerous territory. If referees start deciding that legal actions are somehow unacceptable because they do not feel right, the game could become inconsistent. One referee might allow the deception, another might consider it unsporting, and players would have no clear understanding of what they can and cannot do. That is one of the biggest problems with subjective interpretations of the spirit of rugby. Players need certainty, especially at international level. Codie Taylor should not be punished for exploiting a weakness or ambiguity in the law if the law permits him to do so. The responsibility ultimately belongs to World Rugby to decide whether the law needs changing. However, there is another possible solution that would not have required Amashukeli to punish Taylor at all. The referee could simply have stopped play, allowed the Bulls' defense to reset, and instructed Taylor that the penalty needed to be retaken. That approach would have avoided a harsh penalty against the All Blacks, while also removing the advantage gained from the deceptive movement. It would have been a piece of game management rather than a strict disciplinary intervention. Whether that would have been technically justified under the existing framework is another debate, but from a practical refereeing perspective it could have prevented the controversy completely. The most important point is that Amashukeli did not make an obvious refereeing error. He saw the situation, listened to the Bulls' complaints, understood what Taylor had done, and still believed the law allowed the try. His response was decisive rather than hesitant, and that deserves recognition. Referees are increasingly placed under enormous pressure in modern rugby, particularly when controversial decisions are immediately dissected through television replays and social media. A moment that lasts only a few seconds can become a major talking point for days. In this case, however, the bigger question should probably be directed towards World Rugby, not Nika Amashukeli. If World Rugby believes that players should not be permitted to dummy quick taps in this manner, then the law should be clarified. Rugby should not expect referees to invent restrictions that do not clearly exist. At the same time, this incident demonstrates how rapidly rugby's laws can become complicated when players discover creative ways to exploit them. The sport is constantly evolving, and coaches and players are always searching for small advantages. What appears strange today can become normal tomorrow. That is why law discussions like this are so important. They force the governing bodies to consider whether the lawbook is keeping pace with the way modern rugby is actually being played. Interestingly, Amashukeli's performance in Pretoria contained another major decision that showed exactly why referees sometimes deserve more credit than they receive. Later in the match, Bulls lock Juann Vermick appeared to have scored after powering into the All Blacks defensive line and reaching towards the try line. The initial on-field decision was a try, but the decision was referred for review. TMO Eric Gosens examined the available footage and believed the ball had been grounded short before Vermick knocked it forward. Assistant referee Carl Dixon was also involved in the discussion, and the officials debated whether there was enough evidence to change the on-field decision. Gosens told Amashukeli that the ball had been grounded short and then knocked on, effectively recommending that the try be overturned. But Amashukeli did not automatically accept the recommendation. Instead, he reviewed the evidence from his own perspective and concluded that the available angles did not provide clear enough evidence to overturn his original decision. He therefore stuck with his on-field call and awarded the try. That decision is significant because it demonstrates an important principle in modern rugby officiating. Technology should assist the referee, not replace the referee's judgment when the evidence is inconclusive. Schock Burger, the former Springboks flanker, highlighted this during the broadcast, pointing out that nobody was in a better position than the referee to make the decision because Amashukeli had been watching the play live and had the best possible view of the grounding. The TMO can provide additional angles, but those angles do not always provide a definitive answer. Television viewers often assume that because an incident has been replayed several times, the correct decision must be obvious. In reality, slow-motion footage can sometimes make an incident even more confusing. The referee has to determine whether the evidence reaches the very high threshold required to overturn an on-field decision. In this case, Amashukeli believed it did not, and he stood by what he had seen. That was a strong piece of officiating, especially considering how much pressure referees can face when they disagree with their television officials. The two incidents involving Codie Taylor and Juann Vermick therefore provide an interesting contrast. In the Taylor situation, the law appeared clear enough to allow the try, even though many people disliked the way the advantage was created. In the Vermick situation, the evidence was not considered sufficiently clear to overturn the referee's original decision, and Amashukeli correctly retained authority over the final call. Both moments demonstrate the difficult position referees occupy in modern rugby. They are expected to apply increasingly complicated laws while also managing the spirit and flow of the game. They are expected to use technology without becoming completely dependent on it. And they are expected to make decisions that satisfy players, coaches, broadcasters, and millions of supporters watching from around the world. The All Blacks ultimately benefited from the controversial Taylor try, but the incident had little impact on the overall outcome of the match. The bigger consequence is the conversation it has created about the direction rugby should take. Should the sport allow players to exploit every legal opportunity available to them, even when it feels contrary to traditional sporting etiquette? Or should World Rugby introduce clearer restrictions around deceptive quick taps? There is a strong argument for clarity rather than punishment. If the governing body believes that Taylor's move undermines the spirit of the game, The easiest solution would be to amend the law so that both attacking and defending players understand exactly what is permitted. Until then, however, players such as Codie Taylor are entitled to use the laws as they stand. The All Blacks hooker spotted an opportunity, exploited it brilliantly, and scored a try that was legal under the current rules. Nika Amashukeli should therefore not be remembered as the referee who made a mistake. Instead, this should be remembered as an example of how rugby can sometimes create situations where the law and the spirit of the game appear to move in different directions. The solution is not necessarily to blame the official. The solution is for World Rugby to decide whether the law needs clarification. And if the governing body does change it, the Codie Taylor incident could become one of those fascinating moments that helped shape the future of rugby. For now, though, the verdict is simple. Taylor's try was perfectly legal, Amashukeli was correct to award it, and the controversy tells us far more about the current state of rugby's laws than it does about the quality of the referee.